And welcome to the Jay Hendricks Show. And I am Jay Hendrick. Man, I cannot wait for today. You know why, my people? Because I'm about to drop some nerd knowledge on you. That's right. I'm about to get it. I'm about to break it down. I'm just kidding. But I do want to talk about something really cool and nerdy. I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the popular movies that's come out recently, especially with all the comic book stuff coming on, I guess probably the genesis of a lot of that in a lot of people's minds is the movie Iron Man. Well, Iron Man was an older concept that Marvel brought back, I believe, from the 60s or 70s. What's really cool about it, though, is, and the part I want to talk about today, is that they went and looked around whenever they found Robert Downey Jr. As a lead for that particular episode for Iron Man to be Tony Stark. They went and looked at some people to model them after. Well, what they actually did was they modeled him after a guy by the name of Musk. Elon Musk. Elon Musk is I gotta tell you, man, he's like a nerd superhero. I mean, he's like the coolest. I mean, everybody, like all my nerd friends, talk about him in almost reverence. I mean, he's just one of these guys that just seems to do all this cool stuff. Well, Elon actually, he founded Tesla. Tesla is the first real legitimate effort at an all-electric car. I've actually seen a couple out in California. They're not as popular. They're very expensive, but they're really, really cool. So he founded Tesla. He also is, I believe he founded PayPal. And then now, what we're talking about today is he founded SpaceX. SpaceX is bad to the bone. I spoke about this earlier, but I had an opportunity to be close to one of their launch pads out in California. And I got to see one of the places where they launch from. And I got to learn a little bit about his operation. But one of the cool things I want to talk about is an article that's in Popular Mechanics. It was a few days ago. And it talks about this competition that's going on between billionaires. Competition is kind of cool. So there's Elon Musk on one side. He's actually working on creating what's called the Falcon. He's already built the Falcon 9. The Falcon 9, basically what they're trying to do is, in space flight, in spacelift, one of the reasons that it's so expensive is, and you have to lay out so much treasure and so much resource just to get one satellite into space, is because everything besides the actual space, the spacecraft, is not reusable. You don't. It's all disposable. So the rocket booster, the fuel, all that kind of stuff, it's a one-shot, one deal. That's it. Right now, whenever we have to launch something into space, especially if it's in a very high orbit, it costs a lot of money, and we can't use those resources anymore. Well, what they're actually trying to do is there's a space race going on between Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, where they're trying to make a reusable rocket booster. And I'm going to tell you, in the last 2 months, they have both been successful at something that's been very difficult. In November, actually, Jeff Bezos actually launched his Blue Origin rocket. He took it up to just the edge of space. He took it up to, I believe it was 100 kilometers, about 65 miles. And then that's the line. Basically, whenever you're doing engineering, you have milestones that you try and reach for. And the milestones have to do with how you actually say you're achieving and their baseline against other activities. Well, both he and Elon, SpaceX and Blue Origin, were looking to achieve that milestone. So in November, Blue Origin actually flies up to 65 miles, 100 kilometers, and then comes back and lands on its tail. I mean, this is cool. Because see, what that means is, if you can let's say that you can use the same rocket booster for, say, instead of dumping it or having to just do a one-on-one where you launch one satellite and you have to, you expel the fuel and the resources there for the rocket booster, your cost is X. But let's say that you can reuse 50% of the rocket for, say, 4 more launches. Well, the cost has gone down almost exponentially. And that means that we can put more things into space. Right now, if we lose one of our satellites, if we use a comm satellite or that kind of thing, basically it takes years to replenish that. It's a very difficult thing. So what this means is things can be ready to go. They can be, there's not a manufacturing cycle in front of a launch delivery time, which is a huge advantage. You saw a little bit of that in the movie The Martian that just recently came out. And that is something that's true to life. They had this huge window of over a year to get to, again, it's a movie, but to get back to Mars. And when they launched a rocket from Mars to replenish Matt Damon's character, and they bypassed some safety things and all that kind of stuff, the rocket actually exploded, the one that came from the United States, and they had to go to China and borrow one of theirs. And that's the reason you would do that, is because it's just so expensive, and you need a lot of time to constantly, basically you're making these things from scratch every time. So that's what these guys are fighting about. So anyway, in December, what actually happened is SpaceX, Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, actually launched, and they went gangbusters up to, I believe it says in the article, GTO, which is Geo Transfer Orbit, which is a lot higher. So there's in the article, and again, I'll link to it, there's a description of what actually happened. The Falcon 9 is a much larger spacecraft. The Falcon 9 can carry much more variety of spacecrafts, and the Falcon 9 has more versatility than Blue Origin. But Blue Origin was the first. So to talk about the snarkiness here, this is kind of fun. Let's see. When, Jeff Bezos, he did it first in December, in November. And then when Elon actually did it, he says this. He says, Jeff Bezos tweeted, Congrats at SpaceX on landing the Falcon suborbital booster stage. Welcome to the club. Why wasn't that just a little nasty? I beat you, and you can never take that away from me. And Elon Musk answered, it is, however, important to clear out the difference between space and orbit, as it's described well, and he puts an article in other words. In other words, basically he says, yeah, you got to the tip of space, buddy, but I got in orbit, basically is what he's saying. And then boy, it got under his skin, because there's 3 other tweets here that Elon Musk had. Isn't that kind of fun to see billionaires fighting, you know? I think it's kind of interesting. What I think is more important is that there's this achievement going on that's brilliant and wonderful to see. There's people going after it. I think this is good for all of us. This is good. This is good. You know, Elon Musk actually wants to go to Mars, you know, and there's right now, there's I want to say they've cut down the travel time, they think, to go to Mars to about 140 days one way. So there's all sorts of complications of keeping somebody alive, having the the spacecraft refueled, being able to come back, making sure you had enough, make sure people didn't go crazy on the way. I mean, it's a brilliant thing. There's actually a lot of research into being able to make a spaceship faster and be able to get there more quickly, which is kind of interesting. All of these things said, as I was reading these articles this morning, it really occurred to me that I don't hear a lot of my Christian friends talking about these science-based issues that are wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful. And I think part of the reason is there's this myth going around that Christianity and science, true science. Now, I'm not talking about scientific positions. There's a lot of scientists, I believe, that have wrongly gotten away from the true discovery of the natural world and gotten into cosmology and philosophy, basically, in order to sell a grant or in order to basically foster their own position. They've gotten out of their domain. But it doesn't mean that Christians can't be heavily involved and greatly involved in scientific discovery. I think we've got to do that. See, I think in order to do that, we've got to dispel that myth. We've got to break it down. We've got to talk about those things that create wonder and excitement. There are a lot of Christian theologians that believed and supported and were excited by science. C.S. Lewis, Blaise Pascal, a lot of guys that really love science, and they wondered about it. And I think that's wonderful. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about this. See, the real problem here is there's some presuppositional means it's those beliefs that we have that support beliefs. They're founding beliefs. I believe that God created the world. I believe that Jesus spoke it into existence. Okay, I believe that. I believe that happened. I know that there are other people that love science and as much as me or more or whatever that believe that there was another event that occurred that made it happen. Well, whatever they believe or whatever I believe, my thinking, right? My thinking of how I view science and how the information comes in will be interpolated and founded based on that founding principle. It should be noted too that in presuppositions cannot be proven. They're held beliefs on both sides. Do you hear me? On both sides. We talk about how I hear a lot of people talk about how evolution is a fact. Well, it's not. It's an opinion. Now, there's some people that say that they can prove it. Well, go ahead. And I think there's some cases, even as a Christian, I believe that there is microevolution in this world. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to not believe that. But the idea that we all came about based on some accident, I just cannot accept. It is a presuppositional belief that I cannot hold. Because the evidence to me doesn't point in that direction. You see? There's a presuppositional belief, well, more than evidence pointing in the direction. My evidence and how I interpolated it is actually defined by that presupposition. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care what anybody says, people who are on the other side of the argument, they do exactly the same thing, just in an inverted opposite way. And that's what we've got to do. See, as Christians, we don't need to just take back the domain of philosophy, the domain of counseling, right, of social sciences and things like that. We don't need to just take back the domain of arts and literature. We need to take back our property, our borrowed capital in science. There's a lot of founding scientists that believed and were theist, or believed, not necessarily theist as a philosophical position, but they believed that there was a God. In fact, Albert Einstein is famous for saying God does not play dice. Who goes against Albert, right? Albert's the man. With that in mind, I want to talk about C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is probably one of my favorite authors. And one of the reasons I like him, I think more than anything else, is when you read his stuff, there's a wonder. There's a wonder beyond or in or intertwined with his writing. There's always something wonderful and exciting to happen. I think in the Chronicles of Narnia, you hear that come out very clearly. In fact, one of probably my favorite mentors, his name is Knox. He went to be with the Lord a few years ago. He had this bumper sticker on the back of his car. In fact, he's much more of an expert on C.S. Lewis than I'll ever be. And on the back of his bumper sticker, it had a lamppost, and it said, on the back of his car, he had a bumper sticker that said, "Follow me to Narnia." I'll never forget that. I mean, the wonder, this guy who was so smart, he had his PhD, he taught for many years, and then he would talk about he would always talk about the wonder of life. Well, he kind of attracted me to C.S. Lewis, and as I started reading C.S. Lewis, probably my favorite work of his is what is called a space trilogy. There's 3 books he wrote about space. My favorite is something called Out of Silent Planet. Out of Silent Planet is a book where basically he goes, there's a guy, and the main character is Ransom. Ransom is kidnapped. Now is kidnapped and taken on a spaceship to go to Mars. Now, it should be noted that in his writing, there's a lot of things that were in his writing. This was written before the space age actually and published before the space age actually took off. It was written, I believe, in the 50s, the 40s, somewhere in there. It was not written before, like Sputnik, and we went to the moon and things like that. So there's some things that are not that are inaccurate in a way. But this is a guy much like Jules Verne's that's just sitting with his pen and speculating. And here's what he talks about. He talks about space. Now, so Ransom has been kidnapped. He's been taken on the spacecraft. The spacecraft is a really cool spacecraft. It's got like this, it navigates and flies and is propelled based on solar winds, which is kind of a cool concept. And again, full of wonder. But in this one part, I think what's most important is what he says about space. This is Ransom as he's on the trip to Mars and what he thinks about space. He had read of space at the back of his thinking for years and lurked in the dismal fancy of the black, cold vacuity, the utter deadness which was supposed to separate the worlds. He had not known how much it affected him till now. Now, the very name space seemed blasphemous a libel for this Empyrean ocean of radiance in which they swam. He could not call it dead. He felt life pouring into him from every moment. How indeed should it be otherwise, since out of this ocean all the worlds and all their life had come? He had thought it barren. He now saw that it was the womb of worlds, whose blazing and innumerable offspring looked down nightly, even upon the earth with so many eyes, and here, with how many more? No, space was the wrong name. How cool is that, right? I mean, the idea of going through the nursery of worlds. It's a beautiful concept. See, I think if we could ever sit down and talk with people and have a truly wonderful discussion, a truly productive discussion about the origin of the universe, and truly start matching up our presuppositions somewhat, and start and looking at the cold hard data, and trying to find out, where things are actually true, I think we could make some real ground. C.S. Lewis believed that space, this place out there, was part of God's creation. And if it's part of God's creation, if there's this connection, right, to creation here that he's talking about, obviously here, that not only is it good for us to think about it, for us to study it, but it's something for us to subdue, right? According to the cultural mandate, it's something for us to tackle. It's something for us to explore. And just with further documentation, further kind of definition of this, there's a verse here in the Bible. There's several verses in the Bible that talk about how God owns the world that we live in. But and this is from Jeremiah 23. Verses 23 and 24. God is not speaking directly of his ownership, right? He's talking and actually going after and going after mankind or man or his people and saying, you can't hide from me. But in saying that, he says something about himself and gives away an attribute. Here's what he says. And there's been this long, to put it in context, there's been this long comment and diatribe from the Lord Almighty, where he is convicting man for his insolence or for his sin and those kind of things. But in that he says, am I God at hand? In other words, am I something, a king, somewhere where you can put your hand on me, declares the Lord. Pick up, it says, declares the Lord. And not a God far away. He doesn't mean that he's distant from people. It means that he's unreachable through normal things. Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him? That's what God's saying. He's saying, look, I know every square nanometer. Declares the Lord. Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord. That's exactly my position. See, that's what the book Out of Silent Planet is about. What actually happens in that story, to give away the plot a little bit, I recommend you read it. It's kind of fascinating to me. But Earth is a fallen planet. So when Adam and Eve sinned, the result of that sin was that Earth had been yanked away from the rest of creation. See, that's a foreign concept to us. See, we're always Earth-centric, right? We're always centric on our little universe, and our little universe, I use that with a small u, our little bubble, humanity. But actually, C.S. Lewis postulated there could be life on other planets in this book. In fact, Ransom goes to another planet where there is life. And he goes and interacts with that life. And that planet did not fall in the same way, which is fascinating to think about. And what he's actually doing is he's painting this picture of what if Earth had not fallen? What if the representatives of humankind had not sinned and gone against God? And he talks about that, and he goes and there's some interesting scenarios that I won't give away. But here's, I think, what must have been, again, I don't know what was in his mind, but it would have been verses like this where it says, where God is actually saying, I own heaven and earth. And I think that's pretty clear in that work. With all that being said, we do need to attack science because it's God's domain. And if we can get there in his providence, we can subdue it. And it's a good and holy thing for us to do.